The original blue zones were places where people lived the longest, and it was straight math. The people had the highest, most likelihood of reaching age 90 or older. And there's a new metric that's come on, which is health adjusted life expectancy, run by Global Burden of Disease Projects. And I'm working with them to identify the parts of the world with the highest health adjusted life expectancy.
Yeah, you define that again for you. Health adjusted life expectancy. So I know what life expectancy is.
So it's years of life you can expect in full health.
Okay.
Without chronic disease and without disability. So that's what we want. We don't want to just live a long time.
It's what I call health span versus lifespan.
Yes, that's like, yes, that's a good word for it. But it's to live a long time and die quickly, but leave a beautiful corpse and a lot left over for your heirs.
Fall off a cliff, right?
Yeah. And it turns out there's some overlap with the original blue zones, but there's lots of other things that come to play. And I'm trying to parse that out. And, if you're an average American right now, you're losing somewhere, living an average American lifestyle, you're losing somewhere between 10 and 15 years of extra life expectancy. We talk prospectively.
You mean you're leaving it on the table? What does that mean? What do you mean you're 10 to 15 years of life expectancy just because you're living in America?
Yeah. So these blue zones I found, for example, in Sardinia, these are people with an average set of genes who at middle age, about our age, are expected to live an extra 10 years. So this isn't some supplement or some theoretical intervention. These are real people with an average set of genes who are likely to live 10 more years longer than an American has. And there's a very clear cluster of factors of what their environment looks like, of policies being put to work, of traditions that continue to live on. And, my work lies in identifying that cluster and trying to put that cluster to work in people's lives. And even more directly, and we've had a lot of success with it, entire cities. And my daytime job for much of the past 15 years has been, we get hired by insurance companies to lower the disease load in cities, and then we get paid a portion of the healthcare savings. So, it's directly.
I love that model, by the way. It's the right way to do things, I think.
I know we're going to talk about the 9 common denominators here in a little bit, but the core insight to blue zones, and the one that everybody misses because it's very hard to make money at it, is if you really want to live longer today.
Yes.
Trying to change your behavior is a failure for most people almost all of the time. People, there's a few people who, single digit percentages who have the discipline and the presence of mind to do, even if they know the right thing, if they read Longevity, Your Practical Playbook, which by the way is a great book and full of all the right ideas. But it's very hard for people to have the discipline and with all the new information, keep doing the right thing for long enough to make a difference. People in blue zones are living a long time, not because they have better individual responsibility, not because they're better people or have better access to information or supplements or stem cells. They just live their lives. And
it's their normal, the habits we'd love to have are their normal lives already.
Yeah, and they're not even habits. It's the default. It's their unconscious decision is engineered.
Interesting.
Day to day, moment to moment for decades. And what makes money is this notion that do this one thing.
Yes.
And
sell it now, right?
Yeah,
buy it now.
and do it tomorrow, and you're going to live longer. But nothing that we know of other than not dying works if we just do it for a month. There's nothing we can do this month or even this year that's going to have any bearing as to whether or not we live another year of life in 2078.
Right.
If we don't continue to do it. So
no, I find that fascinating. It's like these are the they eat the right foods because that happens to be indigenous to what the cultures eat there. They happen to get the exercise because they don't drive cars; they're just walking. They happen to be in communities. So all the things the 9 attributes, the default attributes, happen to be ingrained in their lives default in a default fashion. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, almost, I read in Longevity, Your Practical Playbook, when you talk about your diet, that's a Blue Zones diet.
Yeah.
Very hard to eat that. Very hard to eat a whole food plant-based diet if you live in Iowa or if you live in Houston, Texas, because we like to eat what's delicious, and what's delicious, what's engineered for our palate is fast food.
I think you have to, part of what I try and do is give people a longevity mindset that there's a lot of transformation coming. There needs to be a positive motivator that's stronger than the feel-good fat sugar motivator. You have to have something countervailing that. Otherwise, why wouldn't you go the McDonald's route? I mean, if you know that instead spending extra time and money and difficulty, because it's much easier just eat a fast food diet, but I have to know that if I go the other route, it is going to allow me to feel better, live a longer life. And I have to value that. And for me, it's mindset shift. Your mindset is how you react to things. So I've trained myself to just attack vegetables. I love broccoli. My favorite food in the world. You ask me, it used to be ice cream. Now it's broccoli with olive oil and lemon. It's like, yeah.
Well, I think you nailed it. I mean, if you can get people to change their mindset, but for most people, it's very hard to get them to care about their health in 40 years, because when you're 30 years old, you can eat Big Macs and pizza and KFC, and you
don't think about it.
You feel fine the next day. You don't realize it's not for 30 years until that heart disease or type 2 diabetes. People kind of care about health. They kind of care about the impact that eating makes on the environment or animal cruelty. But what they really care about is what is delicious today.
Yeah. Listen, I didn't have this mindset and this focus when I was in my 30s. Even into my 40s, it really was after 50. How about yourself? When did you start thinking about this and really caring about this?
I started this project when I was in my 40s, and I could very clearly see what was driving longevity. But I think the bigger point is I was tasting this food. And when you take all the culinary genius that's at work in Blue Zones and you put it to work at the food here, I was eating it because I loved it. I start my day every day with a Sardinian minestrone, which is 100% plant-based with 3 beans. And I look forward to it now. But that is explosively delicious in my mind.
By the way, I know this about you. It's like we were on stage together and like final recommendations, and yours was eat beans. So I want to talk about that. I do want to get into that for folks to realize, because that little clip of Dan Buettner audio plays in my brain. So it's important. Where did you get the data for your? I mean, it's a huge amount of data. Did you work with governments, institutions? How did you actually get the numbers that allowed you to elucidate where the Blue Zones were?
So I work with 2 demographers or 3 or actually 4 demographers that were experts in this sort of longevity. Jay Oshansky, Michelle Poulon, and Gianni Pes. And their academic research is worldwide census data, where you can kind of find life expectancy at the national level, but you can also often break it down to the regional level. And then once you find an outlier, we actually go to these places and we find birth certificates that go back, let's say, between 1900 and 1924. And you find all of those, the people who were born then who made it to age 90. And then you correct for immigration, emigration. It's a big job. We spent 2.5 years finding these places and then confirming their ages before we even started this project. But, there's not a shadow of a doubt that these people are living longer than we are.
I was surprised. I'm not surprised when I see, Okinawa and Icaria and Costa Rica. I was surprised to see Loma Linda. which isn't far from where we are. And I have never thought of, that part of California as a blue zone. What's up there?
I was writing the story for National Geographic, and my editor, Peter Miller, said, you need to find America's blue zone. And there's actually not a geographic blue zone like you see in the other 4 areas. But it turns out that there's something called the Adventist Health Study that followed 103,000 Americans for 30 years. And if you're an adherent Adventist, your life expectancy is about 7 years longer than it is if you're not an Adventist.
Is it fasting?
And the highest concentration of them are in Loma Linda. That's why we call Loma Linda a blue zone.
Got it.
The reason they're living longer, again, it's a number of factors, but first of all, this idea of a Sabbath, I think, is a lot more powerful than we think. They take it very seriously from sunset on Friday until sunset on Saturday, no matter how busy they are, no matter where the kids need to be driven or what the social schedule is demanding, they stop everything and they take a sanctuary in time, which includes slowing down, stress reduction, includes taking the focus off of whatever's stressing you out and placing it on a higher being. They always have a potluck lunch, and then hardwired right in the religion is a nature walk. So this is something they're doing every single week for decades. Back to this old idea, you have to think long-term. They also take their diet directly from the Bible. And I'm not a big Bible reader, but if you look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 through 30, God lays out the diet to the Garden of Eden.
Wow.
Very clearly, 3 things.
I'm writing these down.
Every tree that bears fruit, so that's citrus and apples and tomatoes and avocados. Every plant that bears seed, so that's beans and grains and seeds and nuts. And then one stanza later, green vegetables or greens. And that's what the Adventists eat. There's no mention of tomahawk steak or lobster thermidor. It's
or Skittles.
Yeah. So the Adventists actually followed. So they're mostly Adventist. Adventists also tend to hang out with other Adventists, and this is another longevity strategy we overlook. We know that if our 3 best friends are obese or overweight, there's about 150% better chance that you'll be overweight. Who we hang out with has a huge and lasting impact on our health. And most Adventists, because they have this Saturday Sabbath and they're conservative Christians, they tend to hang out with each other. So they're not going to the party where they're sitting around roasting wieners and,
hot dogs
doing
and
shots of
hamburgers,
tequila.
right? Yeah.